And now I would like to show you a few examples how to attack the king when he is not in the center, but he already has castled. Now, there are few different types of attack. One of the cases in when you have a big positional advantage, and then you can turn your attention to the king side. But in order to do this, you have to control the situation in the center, and he has to be closed, because you know that, for example, when you try to attack on the king side, but the center is open, your opponent can make a counter attack there, and then your attack will be not successful. So the first game which I want to show you is exactly this type of game. I was playing here with white against another GM, Lanka, and after e4, c5, the game goes into Sicilian Defense, where black plays one of the main lines with knight c6 and d6. As you know, here white has many different possibilities, but at that time my favorite line was with the move pawn to f4, which is not considered as one of the main lines for white. Usually white goes bishop g5 or bishop e3 or bishop c4. But f4 I think is also an interesting line. Now black has to choose between the setups with e6 and with e5. This is the main difference. Of course, he can maybe switch to dragon with g6. And my opponent decided to play e5, knight f3, and bishop to e7. So here usually white is playing bishop d3 and then castle, and he is trying to attack on the king side. But I had another interesting idea, which is not so common, and this is with the move f5, which seems like a very strange move. Why do you waste time in the opening to push the pawn to f5, where first of all black can play maybe g6, or he can just develop his pieces naturally? The idea of the move f5 is actually to first to close down the bishop, to not allow him to go to e6, and then actually the fight is for the square d5. White wants to control this outpost, and in many occasions he wants to go bishop g5, then to take this knight on f6 and to jump with his knight on d5. So for this reason my opponent decided to play h6, because this way he managed to keep his knight on f6, and now bishop g5 is not a possible move. But from the other hand, h6 is a kind of waste of time, and now white could develop his bishop to c4, and once again he wants to fight for this outpost d5. Now black wanted to fight against my bishop on c4, so he decided to develop first his queenside and then to castle kingside, and after castle he goes rook c8. Now black wants to jump with his knight, and he wants to remove, if possible, the bishop from this good diagonal, because here the bishop is very influential, controlling the d5 square and attacking against f7. So I was wondering what to do here, because maybe black wants to play knight a5 and then knight c4. And I decided to defend my bishop with the queen, queen e2, because now when the bishop goes d3, also the queen is protecting the square c4. So basically, even if for the moment the bishop is not so active on d3, I think as well the knight on a5 is not so good either. And now black went a6, and here it was time to try to think what is the plan and what to do next in the middle game. Obviously, when I have a pawn on f5, my idea would be to attack on the king side, especially when already black has moved his rook, and this is clear that he is going to castle king side. And my natural plan will be to push the pawns, to play something like g4, h4, g5. In the moment, maybe g4 could be played, but for example, if you go g4 and he takes, now after queen g2, knight f6, you cannot take on g7 because rook g8 you lose the queen. So I have decided to move my king away from this file, and now already I can think about g4 and rook g1 and g5. And here black has to decide what to do. I think now he was a bit concerned to castle immediately, and he realized that his knight on a5 is not doing anything. So instead of trying to play b5, which is some kind of natural idea when you want to bring the knight to c4, but now the problem could be that after a4, the pawns on b5 and a6 are hanging. That's why black has decided to abandon his plan to move the knight to c4, and he went back to c6. And now he wants to go to b4 and once again to attack this bishop, and if possible to take it. So even if it might seem that now the bishop is very bad on d3 and there is no need to try to keep him, actually I thought that it could be clever to play the move a3, even if it's some kind of waste of time, because the idea of the move knight b4 would be not only to take the bishop on d3, but to move the bishop to c6 and then to prepare d5. So now, with this move, the black knight has limited options. I don't think that he will go back to a5, he cannot go to b4, and now he is blocking first the route of the rook, and then he is blocking his own bishop. So the only possibility for him is to go to d4, where I could just take it, and then black will have these double pawns on the d file. Now already black, he doesn't have too many possibilities, so he has to castle. And here I start to think once again about some g4, some rook g1 moves, but I have decided first to develop my pieces. Probably g4 was an interesting idea, but I was a bit concerned about some kind of moves like knight d4 and then bishop c6 and d5, because my king is on this diagonal. So first I decided to prevent the move knight d4, and after rook e8, now black wants to play bishop to f8, and then maybe to push d5, and then maybe e4. So I started calculating the move rook g1 and g4, but I thought that all the time black will have this counterplay with the pawn on d5. And then I was thinking, okay, what if I just jump on d5? This way I will block all his potential active counterplay, because apart from the move d5, I don't see what else black can do. And now he has to take. And I take with the pawn. And I thought here white has a full control on the board, because now if you move the knight to a5, maybe I can go even b4. And if you bring the knight to b8, now you can see that black is almost a stalemate. And I have all the time in the world to prepare now. I can go knight d2 maybe, to move this knight to e4, and then to prepare g4, rook g1, g5. So white will win very easily here. And my opponent was good enough, so he knew that he has to do something, and he decided to sacrifice a pawn, which was his best practical chance, e4. And now if I take the knight, he will take my bishop, and then it will be more or less equal game. So white has to take this pawn, and now knight a5. Black wants to go bishop to b5, or knight c4, and to activate his knight, as well the bishop. Also the bishop could go to f6, so suddenly black will manage to activate almost all his pieces. Both rooks will get their files, both bishops could go to b5, f6, and the knight potentially could go to c4. So here my task was to try to prevent most of his active ideas, and I decided to go back with the bishop to d3 to not allow knight c4 and bishop b5. And after bishop f6, here I had a lot of possibilities, but I decided to move the rook to b1, because I didn't want to play c3 to allow him to go with the knight to b3. And after b5, black wants to jump with the knight on c4. Now of course white can move the queen away, and then after knight c4 simply to go bishop to d4. But I had some interesting idea, in this case after queen e7, I have decided to sacrifice an exchange because my idea was that now, after queen f2, he has to take, obviously, and now I have only one pawn. But all of his active ideas now are not possible. First of all, the knight doesn't have any squares to go. He has to go to b7. His bishop is also blocked. The rook is not attacking anything, and then, even if I am exchanged down, I thought that I have time now to prepare my attack against the g7 square, and my plan was to bring the bishop to d4 and the queen to g3, and I thought it would be very difficult for black to defend the pawn on g7, and even maybe I have time, if this plan is not working, to try to push the pawns with g4, h4, g5. So basically with this exchange sacrifice, now I think, like I said, now black has limited counterplay and white has all the time in the world to prepare his attack. So his knight has to go back to b7, bishop d4 now attacking the queen. The only move is queen to f8. And here it is also a very important moment. White has to decide how to continue with his attack. I was wondering, should I try to keep the rooks? Let's say to go rook to g1, and then maybe I can open the file with g4, g5, and my rook will be in a good position. But then his knight could go to c5, and then it will change my bishop, which I don't want to allow. So I thought, okay, I have to go b4, and then his knight is very bad. He doesn't have anywhere to go. But after b4, maybe black will play the pawn to f6. And then it will be a bit more difficult to attack his pawn on g7, because this will close my bishop. So I have decided, before playing this pawn to b4, to push f6, because now he doesn't have time to move this knight. White wants to take on g7. If he takes on f6, clearly he will be checkmated after bishop takes. Now queen g3 checkmate is coming soon. So he has to push the pawn. So I was expecting him to play g6. But he played the move g5, which I think is a mistake, but probably he was not happy with some kind of possibilities where white could sacrifice to go queen g3 and bishop g6 and yes, to give checkmate. So he decided to play g5. And now, of course, my task is to destroy the pawn on g5 and to deliver checkmate. So there are few different possibilities. You can try to push h4, but then maybe black will play g4 and his bishop will protect the pawn. And I have decided that before trying to destroy this pawn on g5, first of all I have to block his counterplay, because in order to attack to be successful, I need my bishop on d3. He is controlling this diagonal, and if I lose this bishop, then the king might try to escape. So first I block his knight to not to go to c5, and then he has to take. Now queen takes, and my plan now is to play queen g3, h4, or maybe queen g3, knight takes g5. And you can see that the knight is too far away. He cannot do anything even if he goes to d8. From there, the pawn on d5 is blocking his potential route. The rook, if he goes to e8, I will go queen g3. So he decided to move his queen away, maybe to make some space for his king. But after queen g3, you can see now that white has total domination on the board. And this is a very good example how your positional advantage is transforming into the winning attack. Because when you control all those squares in the center, like now white is controlling everything, then your opponent cannot actually pass through these pawns, and his pieces cannot come near to his king. And when they are far away from the king, then you turn with all your forces. You see white is attacking with 4 pieces. He has 1, also the second pawn might come, and black is defending only with nothing, with maybe the bishop is doing something useful, but all the other pieces, they're not there. So now, after king h8, knight takes g5, And if black takes, white will take with the queen, and then there is no defense from queen h5 or queen h6 or queen h4, checkmate. That's why black went queen g8. This is his last hope, because now if white moves the queen, black will take queen takes g5. So it seems that now black should be able to exchange the queens and then to try to defend in the endgame. But my combination actually is not over. Now knight takes f7. Black has to take. And now bishop to g6. So probably black could play rook to g8 to sacrifice the queen. But then, of course, in this endgame, he is with a lot of pawns down, and white is totally winning. So he decided to take on d5. Now f7 is not possible in the moment, because the queen will take the bishop. But first queen f4, defending the bishop, and now there are too many threats. f7 checkmate, queen h6 checkmate. For example, if queen g5, it will be f7 checkmate. So here my opponent has resigned. It will be a good end of the game actually if white managed to checkmate only with the bishop and the pawn. So this was another interesting game which I have decided to show you. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, there is one more thing that you will enjoy as well. Recently, I've been analyzing the results of different students of the Remote Chess Academy, and I've been checking who are the guys who got the greatest amount of progress. And it came down to the group of people who studied some of our most fundamental courses. And not only those guys studied these courses, but they also really mastered the skill. And that's the level that helps you to gain 3, sometimes even 5 additional 100 rating points just after mastering a certain one course. And that's why I've decided to open a new enrollment for this course. This way, you're not just going to be studying watching the video lessons, but you will also get my personal support. I'll be helping you in case you have any questions, you can ask them. You will also have the connection to the other students who are within the same group. And finally, you'll be also receiving certain tasks that will help you to practice and to master the skills necessary. That's why we're going to open up this enrollment, get a certain group of students that we can handle and provide my personal attention to, and then we're going to close the enrollment and stop accepting new students. So if you don't want to miss out, if you want to be in that group of people who are going to significantly improve their chess results after studying and mastering this program, check out the link down below and I'll see you there.